In the glittering world of K-pop, where image is often curated and moments are edited for the perfect frame, there's something profoundly touching about the relationship between Jin and Jungkook of BTS. To many fans, it's obvious that Jin, as the eldest member, has always looked out for the youngest. But what most people don't realize is that this connection wasn't just for the cameras. Jin didn't treat Jungkook like a bandmate. He treated him like family, like blood. Like a real little brother, he never stopped protecting. When BTS debuted in 2013, Jungkook was only 15 years old. He was a teenager in a sea of uncertainty, suddenly thrust into the spotlight with barely a chance to figure out who he was. And standing just a few feet beside him, a 20-year-old Jin, still young himself, but already taking on a role far bigger than he probably imagined. In interviews, behind-the-scenes footage, and especially in off-guard moments, Jin was always there, adjusting Jungkook's mic, reminding him to eat, defending him from criticism, and sometimes just being the wall Jungkook could lean on without needing to explain why. Their dynamic wasn't built on loud declarations or dramatic expressions. Instead, it was filled with quiet sacrifices. Jin letting Jungkook speak first. Jin laughing a little louder at Jungkook's jokes to ease his nerves. Jin standing just a bit closer to him during award shows, concerts, and chaotic airport crowds, not as a gesture of showmanship, but of instinct. Protection, it wasn't long before fans began to notice. Jin treats Jungkook like he raised him. One ARMY commented on a compilation video of their moments. And in many ways, that wasn't far from the truth. Jin has spoken in interviews about how he felt responsible for making sure Jungkook didn't grow up too fast, even as the industry tried to rush him into adulthood. Jin cooked for him, listened to him, and sometimes even scolded him, not out of frustration, but out of deep concern, and the bond wasn't one-sided. Jungkook, for all his independence and growth, never stopped looking at Jin with that unmistakable glimmer of admiration in his eyes. He followed him, mimicked his sense of humor, and leaned into his warmth during moments when the world felt overwhelming. Fans recall one particularly quiet moment when Jungkook reached out to hold Jin's hand backstage, away from the cameras. It wasn't performative. It was real. Over the years, as BTS matured and faced the pressures of international fame, their relationship evolved. Jungkook grew stronger, more confident, but Jin's protective nature never faded. If anything, it deepened. During the announcement of BTS's military enlistments, it was clear that Jin's first concern wasn't himself. It was Jungkook. "Take care of your health," he said, but the look in his eyes said so much more. It said, "I'll be watching over you, even when I'm not beside you." Jin and Jungkook's bond is a rare kind of love in the entertainment industry, a love that never needed to be dramatized to be felt. It's the quiet kind, the kind that never asks for attention, but always shows up when it's needed most. And maybe that's why it resonates so deeply. Because beyond the flashing lights, world tours, and chart-topping records, there's something universal about the way Jin cares for Jungkook. It reminds us of our own older siblings, of the people who held us up when we didn't know how to stand, of the kind of love that doesn't end when the camera cuts to in every hug, every glance, every quiet moment. They told a story, and it wasn't the story of idols. It was the story of brothers. As the years passed, the weight of global fame only seemed to deepen their connection. While some relationships strain under pressure, Jin and Jungkook's bond appeared to tighten. It wasn't always verbal. Sometimes it was just a glance during interviews, a shared joke in a room full of strangers, or a knowing smile during a stressful performance. Jin had this way of grounding Jungkook. He didn't need to say much. Just being there was enough. And for Jungkook, that presence became something sacred. In multiple interviews, Jungkook has credited Jin as someone who helped him grow up, not just as a performer, but as a human being. "Hyun always takes care of us," he once said, eyes lowered with quiet sincerity. That care wasn't performative or conditional. It was steady, gentle, consistent. Whether they were in Seoul or Los Angeles, rehearsing at 3 a.m. or receiving awards in front of thousands, Jin never once let that older brother role slip. Not even when his own heart was tired. One unforgettable moment that left ARMYs emotional was during a backstage clip where Jungkook, clearly overwhelmed after a high-pressure performance, sat quietly with his head down. Without a word, Jin walked over, sat beside him, and simply placed his hand on Jungkook's back. No pep talk, no spotlight, just presence. A presence that said, "You don't have to carry all this alone." Even in Jin's military enlistment letter, there was an unmistakable note of subtle concern for Jungkook. He didn't name him directly, but fans knew there was a softness in the phrasing, an unspoken wish for Jungkook's strength and safety. And when Jungkook later performed solo during Jin's absence, there was a different energy in him. He was brilliant, yes, but also quieter, more reflective. Like someone was missing that in truth. Jin never stopped being a pillar for Jungkook, even while away. And Jungkook never stopped carrying Jin with him. Through every solo release, every award, every moment, he stood in front of millions. In many ways, Jungkook's current confidence is rooted in Jin's early belief in him. Jin never treated Jungkook like someone who needed to be told what to do. He treated him like someone who needed to be believed in. And that belief, spoken through thousands of little moments, became a foundation. Fans still recall one particularly moving interaction during a fan meeting. A fan had asked Jungkook what Jin meant to him, and after a pause, he simply said, "He's my hyung, but also he's the one who raised me." That answer, stripped of showmanship, was perhaps the most honest reflection of what Jin gave him, a safe place to grow. Now, as BTS continues navigating solo activities, enlistments, and the evolution of their identity, one thing remains unchanged. Jin and Jungkook's bond is not limited to BTS. It's personal, it's real, and fans who've watched them for a decade know that no matter how many stages come and go, the way Jin looked after Jungkook, like a real brother, not a colleague, will always be one of the most beautiful and grounding truths in the BTS legacy. Because in the end, beyond the music, beyond the fame, beyond the headlines, there is a young man who once entered this world with uncertainty in his eyes. And there was another young man who made sure he never faced it alone. And that, more than any chart, topping hit is what fans will remember. Jin didn't just protect Jungkook on screen. He raised him with laughter, patience, warmth, and love. And somewhere, even now, across cities or timelines, that brotherhood continues, quietly, unshakably, forever. In the ever-changing landscape of K-pop, where idols are often reshaped by fame, pressure, and reinvention, the relationship between Jin and Jungkook stood like a lighthouse, steady, warm, and quietly guiding. And while many fans came for the music, it was moments like theirs that made people stay. Because watching Jin and Jungkook wasn't just watching a group dynamic. It was watching love in its purest form, unspoken, consistent, and deeply human. What made their bond even more powerful was that it never demanded attention. Jin never boasted about protecting Jungkook. He never posted long captions or dramatic speeches. Instead, he showed up. He gave space. He offered warmth without condition. And Jungkook, in turn, never took it for granted. His gratitude wasn't loud, but it was there. In the way he leaned toward Jin during tough times. In the way his eyes scanned for him during crowded stages. In the way he quietly watched Jin with admiration and silent respect. When Jin released The Astronaut, fans read between the lyrics. Some said the song felt like a farewell, not just to fans, but to the members. And many believed that parts of it were meant for Jungkook. A message of reassurance. A reminder that even while he was gone, he'd still be watching over them, over him. And when Jungkook later performed Still With You, the fan tears weren't just for the melody. They were for the echoes of brotherhood, for the invisible threads that still tied them together across distance and duty. Even now, with Jin fulfilling his military service and Jungkook stepping confidently into the solo spotlight, the connection hasn't faded. If anything, it's matured. It's transformed from daily presence into a kind of emotional imprint, like a handprint on Jungkook's back, reminding him of who stood behind him all those years. Reminding him that even when he feels alone under the weight of his own rising star, he was never truly alone to begin with. And ARMY knows this. They see it in old videos, in live streams, in the smallest glances exchanged in group photos. They make edits, write fan letters, and cry softly at the memories, not just because they miss seeing Jin and Jungkook side by side, but because they felt the love between them. The kind of love that reminds us of someone who once looked out for us too. A brother, a friend, a guardian. Jin once joked that he'd raised Jungkook into a strong, handsome man. It was said with laughter, but behind the joke was truth. He helped Jungkook grow, not just into a superstar, but into a person with empathy, humor, and resilience. And now, as the world watches Jungkook soar, they know that part of his wings were built by Jin, because sometimes the most important love stories in music aren't romantic.